She laughed at the human's nunchucks. A minute later, her armor was scattered across the floor. Sergeant Kyan Thorne, late of the United Earth Alliance Survey Corps, blinked slowly, the acrid dust of the collapse settling on his tongue. The floor was less a floor, and more the fragmented remnants of what looked like ancient crystalline architecture, jutting from the humid earth of this deep subterranean world. His nunchucks scavenged from a martial arts hobbyist's personal effects back on the downed transport ship, felt ridiculously light in his hands. The alien woman, bathed in the faint shifting luminescence of the caverns, had made a sound that registered somewhere between a chuff and a trill, her species' version of laughter apparently. It had echoed off the slick bioluminescent walls of the passage they were trapped in. Her armor, intricately layered plates that shifted color with her mood, currently a dismissive, icy blue, had seemed impregnable. Then the cavern ceiling had groaned. A section had collapsed, and Kyan, reacting instinctively with the only weird weapon he had somehow managed to deflect a falling jagged shard of glowing rock that would have pulped them both. The shard had clipped her shoulder pauldron, sending the sophisticated plating scattering into the debris field. Now the laughter was gone, replaced by a stillness that felt heavy and dangerous. She stood taller, her form radiating a brittle intensity, the light rippling faster across her remaining armor, a nervous energy the blue couldn't quite mask. Her face, framed by something that resembled spun glass or frozen energy, was utterly devoid of amusement. Her multiple eyes, usually tracking him with a cool, analytical gaze, were fixed on the splintered nunchuck still clutched in his trembling hand. "This crude tool," she articulated, her voice a low resonance in his skull, a telepathic translation overlaying the faint clicks and hums of her actual speech. It intercepted the stone of judgment. She gestured with a long, graceful limb towards the shard, now embedded harmlessly beside them. "Such a thing is one heard of." Kyan just stared, adrenaline making his hands shake. "Yeah, well, glad to be of service," he managed, his own voice rough and dry. "Didn't exactly plan on getting caught in a cave-in with a pissed-off crystal lady. But hey, improvisation is my jam." He tried for a grin, but his face felt stiff. The crystal lady, Cathar, priestess colonel of the Resonant Guard, though he usually just thought of her as the boss or her royal painness, didn't return it. She rarely did. Her species, the Cathars, seemed to view humor as a dangerous, chaotic anomaly. He'd been assigned to her custody after his transport crashed into this forgotten world, a world the Alliance knew nothing about, a world hidden beneath layers of geological and atmospheric deception. They hadn't killed him outright, mostly because Cathar seemed to see him as a puzzle, a potential weapon, or perhaps just an interesting biosample. His status was somewhere between prisoner, guest, and research subject. His nunchucks, found during the search of his meager belongings, had been deemed quaint and harmless. Clearly, they'd underestimated the sheer desperate absurdity of a human trying to survive. The collapsed passage was now impassable. The external pressure from the seismic event, likely not natural, he suspected, was making the remaining structure groan ominously. Trapped, with Cathar, his sarcastic rogue routine felt suddenly very thin. She moved in a fluid grace beneath the jagged edge of her broken armor, approaching the embedded shard. Her touch on the stone caused it to pulse with a brighter light, a light that seemed to resonate deep within the rock wall. "This stone was loosed from the archives," she stated, not looking at him. "Its trajectory suggests intentional displacement." Her head tilted, her multi-lensed eyes sweeping the debris. "Someone sought to collapse this passage. With us inside." The "us" hung in the air. Alliance protocols for first contact did not cover getting buried alive with the indigenous warrior priestess who thinks your improvised weapon is mystic. Kyan sighed, letting the nunchucks dangle. "Right, sabotage. Because my day wasn't complicated enough." He pushed a hand through his sweat-soaked hair. "Any bright ideas, boss? Or are we just going to admire your broken outfit?" The light on her armor flashed a sharp, annoyed violet. "Silence, human. I am formulating a path." Cathar's formulation involved tracing the resonance lines in the remaining rock, a process that seemed to make the very caverns sing for her. Kyan watched, feeling useless and exposed. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth, exotic fungi, and Cathar's strange metallic scent, which had become strangely familiar in their forced proximity. Hours passed. The silence, punctuated by Cathar's soft hums and the occasional drip of subterranean water, was heavier than the rock above them. He tried to make small talk. So, a priestess colonel, huh? That sounds intense. Like you run the church and the army? Back on Earth, we usually keep those separate. Keeps things less complicated. She didn't respond, her focus absolute. He tried again. You know, these caves are kind of pretty, in a certain death trap sort of way. All the glowing stuff. Still nothing. He slumped against a relatively smooth section of wall, the rough stone cool through his thin undershirt. His uniform, what was left of it, was torn and stained. He missed fresh air, sunlight, and not having to constantly monitor his every word lest he inadvertently trigger some ancient Catherine death curse or social faux pas. His crash had been sudden, violent. One minute he was a simple logistical analyst on a deep space survey mission. The next he was picking himself out of the wreckage on an unknown world, the sole confirmed survivor. Finding the Catherines had been both a salvation and a new kind of perdition. They were technologically advanced. Their cities built within massive, naturally occurring subterranean structures. Their society steeped in layers of ritual and ancient law. They were also deeply xenophobic, particularly towards surface dwellers, whom they considered simple, chaotic beings. The fact that he was allowed to exist, however precariously, was due to Catherine herself. She held a high position within the Resonant Guard, the defenders and keepers of the Catherine archive cities. She had taken him under her wing, command. It felt more like she'd acquired an interesting specimen for her collection. His attempts at cultural exchange, mostly consisting of him explaining Earth concepts, like sarcasm, pizza, and the inherent pointlessness of bureaucracy, had been met with polite, chilling silence, or the occasional bewildered. He'd learned more about the Catharines by observation, their reliance on resonance, a form of telepathic communication and environmental interaction, their rigid social hierarchy based on bloodlines and frequency harmony, and their deep reverence for their history, stored in immense, archive stones like the one that had nearly crushed them. He also learned they had enemies, not just abstract ones. There were whispers of the Void Eaters, an ancient enemy species, and bitter feuds between the dominant archive bloodlines. It was into this complex mess that his nunchucks had just carved a tiny, unexpected path. Cathar finally spoke, her voice low and resonant. The rock structure is compromised. A direct path is impossible. She turned, her multiple eyes focusing on him with that unnerving intensity. However, there is a resonance echo, a weak one. It suggests a secondary, unmapped passage. Likely old, sealed. She gestured to a section of the wall near where he sat. It requires focus disruption. Her gaze flicked to the nunchucks. Kyan felt a chill. No. Absolutely not. Those were a one-off miracle, boss. I'm not hitting solid rock with glorified sticks. They are not sticks, she corrected, her tone formal. They are an extension of your chaotic energy, a tool of unexpected force. Your nunchucks are resonant with the disruption required. She held out a hand, palm open. The light on her remaining armor flared, a challenging crimson. Give them. He hesitated. Giving Cathar the nunchucks felt like surrendering his last absurd defense mechanism in this alien world. They were a link to home, however silly, but trapped in a collapsing cave with a warrior priestess who suddenly believed his crude tool was the key to survival. He didn't have much choice. He held them out. Her delicate, multi-jointed fingers brushed his as she took them. The brief physical contact sent a jolt through him, a strange mingling of his nervous system and her resonant energy. It wasn't unpleasant exactly, but it was deeply unsettling. Her species communicated and interacted with their world through this resonance. Touching them was like touching a living conduit. She studied the nunchucks, turning them over in her hand. The wood vibrates at a disharmonious frequency, she observed. But it holds the echo of impact, of applied chaos. She moved towards the section of wall she had indicated, raising the nunchucks with practiced ease that belayed her unfamiliarity with them. She moved with precision, targeting a specific point on the wall. It wasn't brute force, but something more akin to a highly controlled, focused strike, with a sharp cracking sound that felt too loud in the enclosed space. The nunchucks connected with the rock. A ripple of light spread from the impact point. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a fine dust began to sift down. A thin crack appeared, widening rapidly. Cathar struck again, and the crack deepened, a low groan coming from within the wall. It wasn't collapsing, it was opening. A section of the wall, previously indistinguishable from the rest, began to recede inwards, revealing a dark, narrow passage beyond. Success! He felt a surge of relief, quickly followed by wary anticipation. Well, I'll be damned, he muttered. The ridiculous sticks actually worked. Cathar lowered the nunchucks, her multi-lensed eyes meeting his. The light on her armor was back to a cool blue, but with a new, thoughtful quality. Your chaos is adaptable, she conceded, her voice losing a fraction of its usual formality. It is not without merit, she handed the nunchucks back to him. His fingers brushed hers again, and this time the jolt was stronger, a curious warmth spreading through his arm. He shoved the nunchucks into his belt. Just call me Mr. Adaptable Chaos, he said, trying to inject some levity. Cathar didn't smile, but a faint, almost imperceptible flicker passed across her face. It might have been amusement or gas. With the passage open, she didn't hesitate. She moved with swift, silent efficiency into the dark tunnel. Kyan followed, his pulse pounding. The air in the passage was stale, heavy with the scent of undisturbed ancient dust and something else, something sharp and metallic, that prickled the back of his throat. His small, earth-made flashlight beam seemed weak against the oppressive darkness, revealing only a few feet ahead at a time. Cathar, however, seemed to navigate by the faint, ambient light and her own internal resonance. She moved with certainty, her senses clearly far more attuned to this environment than his. This passage is very old, she resonated, her voice soft in the confined space. Sealed before the Great Disharmony. It is not recorded in the current archives. The Great Disharmony. He'd heard whispers of it, a period of civil war or collapse that had nearly destroyed Catharan society centuries ago. It seemed their history wasn't just recorded. It was felt, an omnipresent resonance in their world. The passage twisted and turned, the walls slick with damp. Strange, dormant growths clung to the stone, pulsing faintly with internal light as they passed. Cain kept his hand on the nunchucks, feeling the familiar weight of the wood and chain, a small anchor in this utterly alien place. The external threat that had caused the collapse weighed on his mind. Who wanted them dead? Was it related to the rival bloodlines, as Cathar had implied, or something else? Was it the Void Eaters, the ancient enemy? And why him? A simple logistical analyst. Unless his presence here, a chaotic anomaly from another world, disrupted some delicate Catharan balance. As they moved deeper into the passage, the air grew colder and the metallic scent intensified. It wasn't just metallic, it was the smell of ozone and something burnt, something wrong. Cathar stopped abruptly, holding up a hand. Kyan bumped into her, the contact jarring him. She turned, her multi-lensed eyes wide, the light on her armor pulsing a rapid, warning orange. Resonance disruption, she resonated, her voice tight, strong. Ahead. She held the nunchucks out again, pushing them into his hand. Your chaotic energy, she said, her gaze locking onto his. We may need it again. The trust implicit in the gesture, the reversal of their earlier roles, her the amused, dismissive custodian, him the fumbling alien, felt significant. He took the nunchucks, his fingers closing around the familiar wood. His heart hammered against his ribs. Okay, he said, trying to sound braver than he felt. What kind of disruption? Cathar hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. It was the first time he had seen her look anything less than utterly composed. Unfamiliar, she admitted softly, but discordant, violent. She drew a weapon from her belt, a sleek, crystalline blade that hummed with contained energy. It looked capable of cutting through solid rock. We proceed with caution. They moved forward slowly. The passage opened into a wider cavern, and Kyan's flashlight beam swept across a scene that made his blood run cold. The metallic smell was overwhelming here. Piles of debris, but not natural rockfall, twisted metal, shattered crystalline structures, and something organic, something dark and viscous. It looked like the aftermath of a battle. But who had fought here? And against what? Cathar froze. Her crystalline blade held ready. The light on her armor was now a dark, ominous violet. The Void Eaters, she whispered, the resonance in his mind trembling with an emotion he hadn't heard from her before. Fear. Kyan shone his light around the cavern. Scattered amongst the wreckage were several large, dark shapes. They were partially obscured by debris, but he could make out jagged, non-symmetrical forms, glistening surfaces that didn't reflect light properly. They looked wrong, like something pulled from a nightmare. What are they? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Ancient enemy, Cathar, resonated, her voice regaining a semblance of control, though still tight with tension. They consume resonance, devour the light. She pointed with her blade. These are dormant. They feed on the residual energy of conflict, then enter a torpor. Dormant. Good. He didn't want to face whatever those things were. Not with Cathar missing half her armor and him armed with glorified sticks, but the metallic smell, the ozone. Something activated them, he said, scanning the cavern. Or woke them up. Cathar's gaze swept the chamber. Her multi-lensed eyes seemed to take in every detail simultaneously. The seismic event, she realized, her resonance sharp with dawning understanding. The collapse, it was not intended to simply trap us. It was intended to funnel us here, into the feeding grounds. The rival bloodlines. Or someone else. Someone who knew the Void Eaters were here. Someone who wanted Cathar, priestess colonel of the Resonant Guard, removed. And him, the chaotic anomaly, inconveniently removed, along with her. It was a trap that had just brought them into terrifyingly close proximity with both a deadly, ancient enemy and each other. Cathar lowered her blade slightly, her gaze intense on his face. They sense the resonance within us, she said, her voice soft but urgent. Even dormant, they are aware. We must pass them without emitting strong energy signatures. Without conflict. Passing a field of dormant resonance-eating monsters with a warrior priestess who practically radiated energy and a human who felt like a walking bundle of unpredictable chaos. Moving through the cavern of dormant Void Eaters was an exercise in pure, nerve-shredding tension. Cathar led the way, moving with an almost supernatural stillness, her energy signature suppressed to the barest whisper. Kyan followed her footsteps, exactly, trying to regulate his breathing, to quiet the frantic thrum of his pulse. Every rustle of his clothes, every scraped boot against the debris, sounded impossibly loud in the silence. The dormant Void Eaters were larger up close, their forms hunched and irregular, like masses of dark, congealed shadow. They seemed to absorb the faint ambient light, leaving pockets of deeper darkness around them. He could feel a subtle, unsettling pull from them, a faint drain on his own energy. It was an instinctual recoil, a deep-seated biological warning. This was something fundamentally alien, something that shouldn't exist. Cathar stopped beside one of the hulking shapes. It pulsed faintly, a low, guttural sound that barely registered as audible but vibrated unpleasantly in his chest. Her hand hovered near its surface, her multi-lensed eyes fixed on it. They drained the light from everything, she resonated softly, leaving emptiness. He understood then, it wasn't just physical energy they consumed. It was resonant energy, the very essence of what made the Catharans who they were. These creatures were the antithesis of their being. His hand tightened on the nunchucks. Chaotic energy, Cathar had called it. Maybe chaos was the one thing the Void Eaters couldn't consume. Maybe his lack of resonance was his protection. And perhaps hers. They continued their slow, painstaking journey across the cavern. The air grew heavier, the metallic scent stronger. Several times, one of the dormant creatures would shift slightly, a low groan escaping it, and Cathar would freeze, a hand reaching back to stop him. The tension between them was a palpable thing, a shared silent fear that somehow felt more intimate than any deliberate touch. He could feel her presence keenly, the slight vibration she emitted even suppressed. The scent of her, the way her form shifted in his peripheral vision. His own body felt hyper-aware, every nerve ending screaming caution. They were navigating a minefield of sleeping nightmares, relying solely on Cuthar's knowledge and his own ability to somehow remain non-resonant. As they neared the far side of the cavern, a new sound reached them, faint but distinct. The scrape of boots on rock, the distant echo of voices. Not Catharan resonance. These were solid, physical sounds. Other beings were in the passage. Cathar turned her head, her multi-lensed eyes narrowing. The light on her armor, suppressed though it was, pulsed with faint, agitated colors, greens and reds and purples. Intruders, she resonated, her voice regaining its sharp, lissome edge, entering from the far side. Whoever had set the trap was here to confirm its success, or perhaps to finish the job, and they were entering a cavern filled with void eaters. This was about to get very, very complicated. Cathar scanned the cavern, her gaze flicking between the dormant creatures and the direction of the approaching sounds. A plan was forming behind those complex eyes. She turned to him, her expression unreadable in the dim light. The intruders carry resonance emitters, she stated. They will awaken the eaters. A terrifying thought, waking up the things that ate energy. Okay, plan B, Kyan asked, his voice low. Do we fight? Or janitor? Cathar held up her hand, signaling him, stay low. Neither. We use their ignorance. She pointed to a narrow opening in the rock wall near where they stood, almost hidden by debris, a ventilation shaft. Old, small, only one can fit at a time. She didn't need to elaborate. If the intruders woke the void eaters, this shaft was their only escape route. And he was slightly smaller than she was, his body less rigid. You first, he said immediately. Her head tilted. You would allow me to precede you? The question seemed genuinely surprising to her. Yeah, well, someone's got to cover your six, boss. And I'm better at dodging, or getting lucky with nunchucks, she nodded. A swift, decisive movement. Very well, she moved towards the shaft, her form a blur in the dimness. The sounds of the intruders were getting closer. The sounds grew louder, bouncing off the cavern walls. The approaching intruders weren't quiet. They moved with a casual confidence that suggested they didn't know what horrors lay dormant around them. Cathar slipped into the narrow ventilation shaft, her armored form just managing to squeeze through. Kyan heard the scrape of metal and crystalline plates as she navigated the confined space. Go. Quickly, her urgent resonance pulsed into his mind. He didn't need telling twice. He scrambled towards the opening, his body aching with tension. He risked a glance back into the cavern. The sounds were right at the entrance now. Footsteps echoed. Voices spoke in a language he didn't understand, but their tone was harsh, triumphant. Then, a sudden burst of light from the entrance. A directed energy beam, sweeping across the cavern. A fatal mistake. The dormant void eaters reacted instantly. A ripple of movement went through the hunched forms. Low growls, deeper and more resonant than before, filled the air. The light around them seemed to dim further, drawn into their awakening presence. The intruders cried out, their voices turning to screams of panic. The void eaters are waking up, and they were hungry. Kyan flung himself into the ventilation shaft. It was a tight fit, the rough rock scraping his back and shoulders. He could hear the chaos erupting behind him, the roars of the creatures, the frantic energy weapon fire, the sounds of struggle and terror. He scrambled forward, following the faint light of Cathar's retreating form ahead of him. Move faster, human, she urged, her resonance tight with urgency. They are active, he pushed harder, ignoring the pain. The metallic, burnt smell was now overwhelming, the acrid scent of the Void Eater's energy consumption filling the shaft. He could feel a psychic pressure building, a sense of violation and dread that wasn't entirely his own. It was Cathar's fear, amplified by their shared confinement, and the telepathic link of her resonance. He felt a sudden, sharp pain in his arm as something snagged him. He cried out, stumbling. Looking back, his flashlight beam revealed a shadowy limb from one of the creatures, somehow reaching into the shaft, its surface shimmering with absorbed energy. It was trying to pull him out. Kyan. Cathar's resonance was a cry of alarm. She stopped, turning back in the narrow passage, reaching for him. It has you. Suppress your light. Suppress his light? He didn't have a light signature. But then he remembered what she'd said about his chaotic energy. Was that what the Void Eaters were drawn to? Was his very existence here making him a target? He felt the limb tighten its grip, pulling him back towards the screaming chaos of the cavern. His feet slipped on the smooth rock. He was being dragged out. Desperation surged through him. He twisted, trying to bring the nunchucks to bear, but there wasn't enough space. Kether reached him, her hand grasping his wrist. The jolt of her touch was immediate, a flood of cold, controlled energy washing over his panic. It was like she was trying to dampen his chaotic signal with her own rigid harmony. It helped, slightly, the creature's grip wavering for a fraction of a second. But it wasn't enough. It pulled harder. Cathar braced herself, pulling against the creature's strength, her resonance a low growl in his mind. Hold! I can't pull you free! The limb was strong, its surface rough and draining. He felt his own strength fading, his consciousness starting to gray at the edges. He was going to be eaten by a nightmare in a ventilation shaft. Just as he thought he was lost, Cathar did something unexpected. She didn't pull harder. Instead, she pressed closer to him in the tight passage, her free hand moving to the back of his neck. Her multi-lensed eyes, inches from his, pulsed with a blinding blue light. Her resonance flooded his mind, not with words but with pure, raw energy. It was overwhelming, a torrent of sensation, colors he couldn't name, sounds he couldn't hear, feelings that weren't his own. It was the resonance of her world, the humming life of the archives, the deep, ancient connection of her bloodline, the fierce, protective energy of the resonant guard, and woven through it all, a single powerful impulse: sync. It wasn't physical force she was applying, but something far deeper. She was attempting a pulse resonance sync, a fundamental aspect of Catharan connection, often used for deep communication, healing, or bonding. But doing it like this, under duress, in the middle of an attack, it felt like she was trying to override his chaotic signal with her own harmony, hoping to make him less appealing to the Void Eater. The creature's grip span. It recoiled slightly, as if burned. His chaotic energy, merged with her powerful, structured resonance, created something new, something the Void Eater couldn't process, couldn't consume. It was repellent. The limb retracted with a frustrated, scraping sound. He was free. Cathar collapsed against him in the narrow shaft, her energy signature flickering wildly. The light on her armor was dimming, fading to a weak, pulsing gray. Her resonance in his mind was faint, exhausted. The sync had taken a massive toll on her. He was still trembling, his arm throbbing where the creature had held him. "Cathar," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Are you okay?" She didn't answer immediately. He could feel her rapid, shallow breathing against his shoulder. After a moment, her resonance returned, weak but steady. I am diminished," she admitted. The sync. This required significant energy, and your chaotic frequency is challenging to harmonize with. She shifted, pushing herself upright, though she still leaned heavily against him. "We must continue, while the creatures are distracted by the intruders." He nodded, though his mind was reeling. Pulse resonance sync. She had synced with him. What did that even mean? Back home, syncing usually involved computers, maybe dating apps. Not this. Not a torrent of alien consciousness flooding his mind. He could still feel the echoes of it, the weight of her ancestral memories, the sharp edge of her warrior training, the deep, unwavering loyalty she felt for her people. It was both terrifying and strangely, profoundly intimate. He started moving again, crawling forward through the shaft, Cathar following closely behind him. The screams and roars from the cavern faded as they put distance between themselves and the nightmare. The air gradually lost its metallic stench, returning to the stale, dusty smell of the old passage. They moved in silence for a long time, the only sounds their ragged breathing and the scrape of their movement. The shared trauma, the forced intimacy of the sink, hung between them, a tangible thing. When they finally emerged from the shaft into another smaller, forgotten chamber, Cathar sank to the ground, leaning her head back against the damp stone wall. Her armor was almost completely dark now, the light gone. She looked vulnerable, more so than he had ever seen her. He knelt beside her. "Hey," he said softly. "You saved my ass back there. Thank you." She turned her head, her multi-lensed eyes meeting his. They were dim without the internal light, but he could still read the exhaustion in them. "You repelled the creature," she resonated, her voice barely a whisper. "Your unique energy. I merely provided the catalyst." He shook his head. "No, you risked whatever that sync thing was. It took a lot out of you." He hesitated, then asked the question that had been burning in his mind. What's that, exactly?" "That sync." She closed her eyes for a moment, a shudder passing through her. "Pulse resonance sync," she repeated. "A merging of resonant frequencies. For us, it is deeply personal, often used for communication, healing, or the initiation of a bond." His blood ran cold. "A bond? A mating bond? A life bond? A bond?" he repeated, the word feeling too heavy, too significant. He thought of Ketharan rituals, the whispers he'd heard about ritual survival pairings and bond marks only given once. Kethar opened her eyes. The light on her armor was starting to flicker back to life, a faint, unsteady blue. "Yes." She resonated, her voice regaining some of its strength, but still laced with exhaustion. "In extreme circumstances, under duress, a partial sync can occur. It is unplanned, but it is not without meaning." She looked at him, her multi-lensed eyes searching his face. "Our frequencies resonated together. It created a disharmony that repelled the Void Eater. But it also intertwined us on a fundamental level." He swallowed hard. This wasn't in the Alliance Handbook for First Contact. Not even the unofficial supplements that covered weird alien mating rituals. "So, what does that mean?" he asked, dread pooling in his gut. "Does that mean we're bonded? Like permanently?" She hesitated, her gaze dropping from his. The light on her armor pulsed faintly, a hesitant color he couldn't quite identify. "Among my people," she finally resonated, her voice formal once more, "a completed pulse resonance sync, performed willingly or under the most dire of circumstances, signifies a bond, a pairing for life." He stared at her, speechless. The pairing for life? He was a human, stranded on an alien world, and he had just accidentally bonded for life with a warrior priestess by getting nearly eaten by a nightmare in a ventilation shaft. This was the most absurd, terrifying, and strangely, intensely intimate situation he had ever found himself in. "Right," he managed, the dry humor kicking in out of sheer shock. "So, getting almost killed by a space vacuum cleaner means we're married now? Is that the gist?" Cathar's head snapped up, her multi-lensed eyes wide. The light on her armor flared a bright, shocked violet. "Married?" she resonated, the concept clearly alien to her. "What is this married?" "It's a human thing," he explained, trying to keep his voice level. "It's what we call a life bond. A pairing usually involves a ceremony, rings, maybe some questionable dancing, less getting eaten by monsters." He felt a hysterical giggle bubbling up. This was insane. Absolutely, utterly insane. Cathar regarded him with an intense, unreadable gaze. She was processing this, comparing his concept of married to her own culture's bond. "Our bond requires no ceremony," she stated eventually. "It is a matter of internal resonance. Our frequencies are now linked. I can feel your presence, even when you are not near." She paused, her gaze lingering on him. "And you can feel mine?" He could. He could feel the faint echo of her energy signature in his mind. A constant, subtle presence that hadn't been there before the sync. He could feel the lingering exhaustion from the effort it had cost her. And something else, a vulnerability he hadn't expected. "Yeah," he admitted softly. "Yeah, I can feel you too." The air between them was thick with unspoken implications. The external threat had forced them together, and now the act of surviving it had bound them in a way neither of them had anticipated. They were no longer just prisoner and custodian, or reluctant allies. They were paired by resonance, by ritual, by the sheer chaotic force of circumstance. Cathar pushed herself fully upright, her movements still a little shaky. "We must leave this place," she resonated, her voice regaining its usual strength, though the undertone of exhaustion remained. "The intruders may yet survive the eaters, and even if they do not, others may come. My people must know of this, know of the attack, and know of their bond." The implications for her, a high-ranking priestess colonel, were likely immense, and for him, he had no idea. His role here had just shifted again, from interesting specimen to unplanned life partner. He still had his nunchucks, his ridiculous, chaotic nunchucks, clutched in his hand. They felt less like a weapon now and more like a symbol of the unpredictable path that had led him here, to this alien world, to this hidden chamber, and to this improbable, terrifying, resonant bond with a Kataran warrior priestess. Getting back to the main archive city passages was a slower, more cautious journey. Kataran, still recovering from the sink, relied more on his physical assistance, navigating the treacherous terrain slowly. The bond they now shared was a constant, subtle awareness between them. He felt her fatigue, the dull ache of energy depletion. She, he suspected, felt his own more chaotic and channel state, his anxiety, his lingering adrenaline, the sheer disbelief of his situation. They spoke little, the silence filled instead by the quiet hum of their linked frequencies. When they finally reached a familiar passage, one with the faint, pulsing light of the main city structures visible in the distance, the contrast was jarring. They had been in the deep, forgotten places, facing ancient threats. Now they were returning to the complex, rigid society that Kethar belonged to, a society that would undoubtedly have strong reactions to their unexpected bond. As they approached the outskirts of a major sector, Kethar stopped. She turned to him, her expression serious. The light on her armor was back to its standard, formal blue, but he could feel the tension beneath it. "Our return will be noted," she resonated. "Our state," observed. Her gaze flicked to his arm where the Void Eater had grabbed him, then to his face. The sink, it may have left a mark, a resonant scar. He didn't understand the concept, but the gravity in her voice was clear. This wasn't something that could be easily hidden. "What will happen?" he asked, his voice low. "To us? To you?" Kethar looked away, her multi-lensed eyes fixed on the distant lights of the city. "Our society is guided by law and resonance," she stated formally. "A bond, particularly one formed under duress, has implications. Obligations." She turned back to him, her gaze intense. "You are an anomaly, human. Your presence here is disruptive. Our bond, it binds that disruption to me, to my lineage." She paused and added, her voice softer, "and potentially, to my fate." His fate was now tied to hers. It wasn't just about his survival anymore. It was about navigating the complex, potentially dangerous consequences of their connection within Catherine's society. The rival bloodlines, the threat of the Void Eaters, the rigid structure of Catherine law. Their bond cut across all of it. As they entered the more populated passages, Catherine guards in their gleaming armor immediately noticed Catherine's damaged state and his presence at her side. Their expressions, usually stoic, shifted to surprise, then suspicion. They were led towards the heart of the archive city, towards the central spire where the ruling council resided. The whispers and stares from the Catherines they passed were like physical touches. His presence was clearly causing a stir, and Catherine's condition, her damaged armor, and his proximity amplified the shock. They arrived at a large, open chamber filled with floating, archive stones and surrounded by elevated platforms where robed Catharan elders sat. This was where judgments were made, where resonance was judged against law. Cathar stood tall, despite her exhaustion, her stance radiating defiance. He stood beside her, feeling exposed and out of place, his torn earth clothes a stark contrast to the elegant flowing robes and shimmering armor of the Catharans around them. A figure on the central platform, older and radiating immense, controlled resonance, addressed Cathar. The voice was deep, multi-layered, vibrating with authority. It was the arch-resonator, the head of the ruling council. Cathar responded, her resonance clear and strong, recounting the attack, the collapse, the void eaters, and their escape. And then she spoke of the sink. The chamber fell silent. The elders on the platforms leaned forward, their multiple eyes fixed on Cathar, and then on him. The arch-resonator's response was slow, measured. A duress bond, he resonated, the words echoing in the chamber. Unforeseen, significant. His gaze settled on Kyan, the human, the anomaly, now bonded to a daughter of the resonant guard. The implications were beginning to unfold, and he had a feeling he wasn't going to like them. The arch-resonator's gaze was like a physical weight. Kyan felt the collective attention of the Cathernalders, a silent, intense scrutiny that went beyond mere vision, probing his very being with their resonant senses. He stood firm, refusing to look away, refusing to show fear. He was still a human, still Kyan Thorn, no matter what alien rituals or monsters he'd stumbled into. Cathar resonated her account of the trap, identifying the likely culprits as a rival bloodline, using the ancient enemy as a weapon. Her voice was steady, strong, though he could feel the undercurrent of weariness through their bond. The elders listened, their faces unreadable. When she finished, the arch-resonator spoke again. The attack is a grave matter. The use of the Void Eaters, an offense against the fundamental laws of harmony. His gaze shifted back to Cathar. But your actions, Priestess Colonel, duress bond with the human. He paused, the silence stretching. This requires interpretation. According to ancient law, a bond formed in the face of existential threat is recognized. It is a right of survival. A right of survival. It sounded less like a marriage and more like a clause in a cosmic insurance policy. But the outcome seemed the same. The anomaly is now bound to you, the arch-resonator continued. Bound by resonance. Bound by the right. He looked at Kyan. Human, you are no longer merely a visitor. You are a part of the resonant guard, through the bond you share with Priestess Colonel Cathar. Kyan blinked. Part of the resonant guard. The heavily armored, ritual-bound warrior caste. This was a serious promotion from interesting specimen. Right, he said, trying to process this. So I'm enlisted? Do I get a uniform? And maybe a weapon that isn't made of wood and chain? A few faint, hesitant ripples went through the elder's platforms, the closest thing he'd ever heard to Cathar in amusement during a formal proceeding. Cathar remained stoic, though he felt a tremor of something that might have been surprise through their link. The arch-resonator regarded him for a long moment. Your directness is unusual, he resonated. The right of survival carries obligations for the bonded pair. He addressed Cathar. Priestess Colonel. Your bondmate must be instructed in the ways of the guard. He must learn to control his chaotic resonance, to harmonize with you and with the guard. He turned back to Kyan. You will be tested, human. Your fitness for this bond, for this role, will be measured. Your failure could have consequences for both of you. Consequences, right? Because things weren't complicated enough. He was bonded to a high-ranking Catharan officer, now apparently a member of her Hurley order. And failure meant, what? Exile? Worse. He met Cathar's gaze. Her expression was unreadable, but he felt her resolve, her queer determination through their link. She would face this, and she expected him to face it with her. His sarcastic rogue persona felt inadequate in the face of this ancient, serious culture and the weight of the bond. But underneath the sarcasm, there was still that core of stubborn survival instinct. He'd gotten this far by sheer luck and improvisation. Maybe he could keep going. Okay, he said, straightening his shoulders. Consider me instructed. Just try not to make the uniform too itchy. The arch-resonator gave a low, resonant sound that was impossible to interpret. The formal proceedings concluded, and Cathar led him away from the central chamber. The stairs were still present, but now they held a new elements. Speculation, the anomaly, and the priestess colonel, bonded by a right of survival. This was unprecedented. As they walked through the intricate passages of the archive city, the faint, pulsing light of their bond was a constant presence between them. They were tied together, whether they liked it or not, and their future was now inextricably linked with the fate of this hidden world. Life in the archive city, as Caithar's bondmate, was surreal. His living quarters were moved closer to hers, within the barracks complex of the Resonant Guard. He was given simple, durable clothing, that felt surprisingly comfortable, though it lacked the shimmering elegance of Kytharin attire. His days were filled with instruction, not in combat, surprisingly, but in Kytharin history, law, and most importantly, resonance. Kythar herself was his primary instructor, spending hours with him in secluded training chambers. She taught him about the nuances of their resonant language, the subtle shifts in frequency that conveyed layers of meaning. She helped him practice focusing his own chaotic energy, not suppressing it entirely, but directing it, controlling it. It was slow, painstaking work. His human mind wasn't built for this, but with Cathar's patient, focused guidance, and the constant, subtle connection of their bond, he started to make progress. He could feel her frustration at his slowness sometimes, but also acceptance, a strange sort of pride when he grasped a difficult concept. Their shared moments, though often formal and focused on instruction, were laced with the undercurrent of their unexpected intimacy. The bond was a quiet hum beneath their interactions, a constant awareness of each other's emotional state. He could feel her weariness after long hours of guard duty, her moments of quiet contemplation, even the rare flicker of amusement. And she, he suspected, felt his own chaotic mix of feelings, his confusion, his loneliness for his own species, but also a growing sense of belonging, a strange pull towards this alien woman and her complex world. One evening, during a break in their training, they were in a small, private training chamber, the walls etched with patterns that glowed faintly. Cathar was demonstrating a technique for shielding one's resonance. She moved with fluid grace, her form shimmering with controlled energy. He watched her, captivated by her alien beauty and the sheer power she wielded. When she finished, she turned to him, her multi-lensed eyes meeting his. The light on her armor was soft, relaxed. Your progress is acceptable, human, she resonated softly. It was high praise from Catharin's standards. You learn quickly for one so. She paused, searching for the right word. Undisciplined. He grinned. Hey, being undisciplined is what saved our butts in that cave, remember? He gestured to the nunchucks he kept strapped to his belt, symbols of his chaotic intervention. A faint, almost imperceptible ripple passed across her face, that potential flicker of amusement again. That was an anomaly, she stated formally. A convergence of unique circumstances. Reliance on such random occurrence is not the Catharin way. Maybe you need a little more random occurrence, he suggested, stepping closer. The air between them felt different tonight. The training was over. The immediate pressures of the council judgment had receded slightly. It was just them and the quiet hum of their bond. Cathar didn't move away. The light on her armor shifted, a warmer, deeper blue than usual. Chaos has its place, she conceded, her voice lower. In controlled application. She raised a hand, her multi-jointed fingers tracing the outline of his face. The touch was hesitant, electric. The bond between them surged, a powerful wave of mutual awareness. He felt her curiosity, her uncertainty, the underlying strength and vulnerability that the sync had revealed. He reached up, covering her hand with his own. Her skin was cool, smooth, utterly alien. Is this controlled application? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Her multi-lensed eyes seemed to deepen, the faint light within them intensifying. Perhaps, she resonated, her voice thick with a resonance he hadn't heard before. Or perhaps, another anomaly. They were standing so close he could feel the faint vibrations of her resonant energy. The bond was pulling them together, strengthening with each passing moment of shared vulnerability. The air in the training chamber crackled with unspoken tension. Cathar's hand remained on his face, her touch sending ripples of warmth and connection through their bond. His own hand covered hers, grounding him in the reality of this impossible moment. He could feel the subtle thrum of her resonant energy, a counterpoint to his own internal chaos. And yet, through the bond, they were harmonizing. Her multi-lensed eyes searched his, and for the first time he saw past the rigid discipline, the warrior priestess facade, to something raw and questioning beneath. She was navigating uncharted territory, guided only by instinct and the strange pull of their bond. The right of survival, she resonated, her voice soft, acknowledges the pairing. But the nature of the bond that is unique to each pair. Our bond it is unlike any I have studied. Maybe that's not a bad thing, he murmured, leaning into her touch. Maybe unique is okay. He felt her inhale, a deep, resonant breath. The light on her armor pulsed, not with alarm or formality, but with a deep, warm gold. A color of significant emotion, he was beginning to learn. Her fingers tightened slightly on his face. Your chaos, it draws me, she admitted, the confession raw and unexpected. My own harmony feels incomplete without it. His heart hammered against his ribs. He had affected duty, obligation, perhaps even reluctant acceptance. Not need, not this raw vulnerability from the formidable Corsair. He lowered his head, his forehead resting gently against hers. The connection through their bond intensified, a wave of shared sensation washing over them. He felt the vastness of her world, the weight of her history, the fierceness of her loyalty, and the deep, aching loneliness that came with her isolated position. And she, he knew, felt his own chaotic swirl of emotions, his fear, his confusion, his stubborn hope, and a profound, unexpected longing for connection in this alien place. Their lips met. Her kiss was tentative at first, exploratory, a meeting of utterly foreign physiologies. Her lips were not like his, but soft, sensitive structures that pulsed with a gentle, resonant light as they touched. It wasn't just a physical kiss. It was a merging of senses, a deepening of the bond. He tasted the metallic hint of her species, felt the subtle vibration of her voice in his bones, saw flashes of light and color behind his eyes that corresponded to her feelings. It was overwhelming, intoxicating. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her closer. Her armor, initially a barrier, now felt like a second skin, flexing and shifting against him. Her own arms came around his waist, pulling him into her embrace. The bond flared, a white-hot intensity that resonated through their bodies, drawing them together with an irresistible force. This wasn't just the physical release. After tension, it was a culmination of shared trauma, forced intimacy, and the strange, beautiful pull of their intertwined resonant frequencies. It was a ritual of their own making, born of survival and anomaly. They sank to the floor of the training chamber, the glowing etchings on the walls casting an ethereal light on their joined forms. The world outside the chamber, the pressures of Catharin society, the threat of ancient enemies, it all faded away. There was only the two of them, two vastly different beings, bound together by chance, by ritual, by a love that defied logic and definition. In the quiet hum of their shared resonance, they found a harmony that transcended species, culture, and chaos. This was their bond, forged in the heart of an alien world, unique and unbreakable. The following morning, the atmosphere between them was different. The intense intimacy of the night before had stripped away layers of pretense and formality. The bond felt stronger, more settled, a comfortable weight rather than a jarring anomaly. Cather was still the priestess colonel, composed and focused, but there was a softness in her multi-lensed eyes when she looked at him, a subtle shift in her resonance that spoke of warmth and connection. He was still Cyan Thorne, the sarcastic rogue, but the cynicism had softened, replaced by a quiet determination and a fierce protectiveness towards this alien woman he was inexplicably bound to. They faced the ruling council again, this time not as those judged by a right of survival, but as a bonded pair preparing for the trials required by the rite. The arch-resonator and the elders observed them with renewed interest. Cather spoke of the attack, presenting evidence she and Cyan had gathered. Resonant echoes recovered from the collapse site, traces of energy signatures linked to a rival bloodline, faint psychic imprints of the Void Eaters. Her account was precise, damning. Cyan added his own perspective, explaining the concept of a physical trap, the human understanding of sabotage and motive. His chaotic, linear thinking offered a different angle that seemed to resonate with the Catharin minds. The council acknowledged the validity of their findings. The threat of internal conflict, exploiting ancient enemies, was a danger to the entire archive city. Their focus shifted from judging Catharin Cyan to addressing the imminent threat posed by the rival bloodline and potential wider awakening of the Void Eaters. As a bonded pair under the right of survival, Catharin Cyan were given a crucial role. They were tasked with leading a small, specialized unit of the Resonant Guard to investigate the rival bloodlines' activities in the deeper, less mapped sections of the Archive City, and to develop a counter-strategy against the Void Eaters using their unique, harmonized resonance. Their bond, initially a source of complication and judgment, had become their strength, their weapon. Their combined frequencies, Catherine's structured harmony and Kyan's adaptable chaos, created a resonance signature that was difficult for both the Void Eaters to consume and potentially for the rival bloodline to anticipate. Their first assignment took them away from the central city, into ancient passages that mirrored the one where they had been trapped. The air was heavy with history, the walls whispering with residual resonance from centuries past. They moved as a unit, their bond a constant, silent channel of communication between them, more efficient than any spoken word or telepathic resonance. They anticipated each other's movements, senses, and needs. In the heart of these old tunnels, they found evidence of the rival bloodlines tampering, ancient sealing rituals disrupted, resonant wards bypassed, pathways open to unstable, Void Eater-infested areas. It was clear the threat was larger than just an attack on Cathar. It was an attempt to destabilize the entire Archive City by unleashing the ancient enemy. One evening, while setting up a temporary camp in a hidden alcove, Cathar turned to him, her multi-lensed eyes reflecting the faint light of their surroundings. The bond, she resonated softly. It was unforeseen, unplanned. But I would not undo it. He met her gaze, his heart swelling. Me neither, boss. He still used the old nickname sometimes, a reminder of how far they'd come from that initial absurd encounter. She reached out, her hand resting on his arm. My path was clear, she resonated. Duty, service, defense of the archives. Now, election, it includes you. In my path, he said, covering her hand with his, was mostly winging it and trying not to get killed. Now it includes defending an underground alien city, with the woman who thinks my nunchucks are mystical. He grinned. Cathar didn't smile back, but her eyes held that soft light he was coming to recognize. Your chaos. It provides a new perspective, she resonated, a strength I did not possess alone. Their mission continued, a blend of tense exploration, tactical planning, and the deepening intimacy of their bond. They faced minor skirmishes with agents of the rival bloodline, navigating treacherous passages and setting resonant traps. Their harmonized resonance allowed them to detect anomalies the enemy didn't know to hide, giving them an edge. In the quiet hours, huddled together for warmth, in the cool subterranean air, they would talk, sharing pieces of their lives, bridging the vast cultural and biological differences between them. He told her about Earth, the oceans, the sky, the strange human need for things like art and music and really bad movies. She told him about the deep history of the Catharans, their connection to the living rock of their world, the weight of ancestral memory, the solemn beauty of their rituals. Their bond wasn't just about resonance. It was about understanding, about seeing the universe through another's eyes. The climax of their mission came when they located the rival bloodline's hidden base, a vast, unstable cavern honeycombed with Void Eater nests. The bloodline planned to unleash the creatures directly into the main city sectors. It was a desperate, suicidal plan, born of bitterness and a warped interpretation of ancient prophecies. Facing them was a tense standoff. Cathar, with her unit, demanded their surrender. The rival leader, a Catharan male, whose resonance was sharp with fanaticism, refused. He intended to unleash the Void Eaters. The battle was short and brutal. The rival bloodline agents, though skilled, were no match for the harmonized strength of Cathar's unit. Guided by her and Kyan's linked resonance, the real danger were the Void Eaters themselves, stirring in their nests, drawn by the conflict. Cathar and Kyan worked together, their bond a constant flow of tactical information and emotional support. She directed her unit with resonant commands, while Kyan used his understanding of physical space and chaotic disruption to anticipate enemy movements and shore up defenses. At the critical moment, as the rival leader attempted to shatter a resonant seal, holding back a wave of Void Eaters, Cathar and Kyan acted together, their combined resonance a powerful, focused burst of harmonized energy struck the leader, disrupting his frequency, stopping him mid-ritual. It wasn't a killing blow, but it incapacitated him, allowing the guard to apprehend him and his remaining followers. The Void Eaters, partially awakened, surged forward, but the disruption in their intended target line, coupled with resonant countermeasures Cathar's unit deployed, sent them recoiling back into the depths. The immediate threat was neutralized. The Archive City was safe, thanks to the combined efforts of the Resonant Guard and its newest, most unexpected member. Back in the Archive City, the reception was different this time. There were no whispers of judgment, only resonant waves of relief and gratitude. The rival bloodline was apprehended, the immediate Void Eater threat contained. Cathar and Cayenne were hailed as heroes. Their bond, once a source of cultural tension, was now seen as a symbol of resilience and innovation. The Arch-Resonator addressed them in the central chamber, the floating archive stones pulsing with approval. The right of survival, he resonated, his voice strong and clear, has proven its wisdom. The anomaly and the priestess colonel, through their unique bond, have defended the harmony of the archives. He looked at Cayenne, human Cayenne Thorn. You came to us by chance, but you have earned your place among us. Through the right, through your actions, and through the bond you share with Cathar, you are now formally recognized as a member of the Resonant Guard. Cayenne felt a swell of emotion. He wasn't just a survivor anymore, or a captive, or a strange specimen. He was accepted. He was part of something. He looked at Cathar, standing tall and radiant beside him, her multi-lensed eyes warm with shared victory and something deeper. The light on her armor glowed with a steady, powerful gold. Later, alone in their shared quarters, the silence was comfortable, charged with the quiet intimacy of their bond. Cathar removed her armor, the intricate plates folding away to reveal the elegant, graceful form beneath. She moved with a weariness born of battle, but her posture was relaxed. He watched her, still captivated. "So," he said softly, walking towards her, "I guess I'm officially enlisted." She turned, a faint, rare smile gracing her face. "You are bonded," she corrected, her resonance soft. "To me, and through me, to the Guard, to the archives." She reached for him, her hand resting on his chest, right over his heart. He could feel her resonant energy, warm and comforting. "My world is yours now," she resonated. "If you choose it." His choice. He had a choice. He could try to find a way home, to Earth, to his own species, or he could stay here, in this hidden world, with this extraordinary alien woman he was irrevocably bonded to. The decision felt both impossible and utterly simple. His gaze met hers. "My choice was made that night in the ventilation shaft," he said, covering her hand with his. "When you synced with me, when you tied your life to mine." He leaned down, gently kissing her forehead. "My world is wherever you are, boss." Cathar closed her eyes for a moment, a soft, resonant sigh escaping her. When she opened them, the light in her multi-lensed eyes was brilliant, filled with an emotion so pure it stole his breath. "Then we face the future," she resonated, pulling him closer. Together, harmonized. Chaos and harmony, protecting the light. The future wouldn't be easy. There were still challenges ahead, integrating a human into Catharan society, dealing with the lingering threat of the Void Eaters, navigating the complexities of an interspecies bond. But they wouldn't face it alone. They were Cathar and Cayenne, bonded by survival, by ritual, by a love as unique and resonant as the hidden world they now called home. And maybe, just maybe, his ridiculous nunchucks still had a part to play in their story.